Carly, correct me if I'm wrong.
What now?
I have this just strange, vague recollection that in the last podcast, on the record, where everybody freaking heard you, you said this air conditioning was going to be fixed.
It was, and it worked for 4 minutes, and then it broke again.
Charming.
Yeah, so that's what happens when you get an electrician out to fix your aircon. They then tell you after 2 hours of working on it that they need to then get the specialist.
And then they charge you full rate for all of that.
Actually, this is just a massive psyop for us to both lose some weight.
I tell you what, I am leaving an impression on the table. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, it's awful.
Well, welcome to summer, everybody, and welcome to another episode, Carly.
Another
we
one.
We are up to episode 6.
We are here, and
which means that we've gotten through the death valley of podcasts, which is around about 5 episodes.
Yes.
And we're at the other side of that now.
And they're like 2.5 hour long episodes.
They are ridiculously long.
Not only are we doing episodes, we're actually doing like 5 in one.
The problem is you put 2 people who talk too much on the same podcast, you're going to have a problem sticking to your hour-and-a-half target.
This is true. This is true. So let's just get these show notes up, which, by the way, are almost 30 pages.
It's ridiculous. We do not want to set a new record for duration today, but we might.
We are limited merely by the batteries of the cameras.
Pretty much. If we had... thanks for the hair. Yeah.
That's complimentary with every stay here at my house.
Okay,
Thanks to my dogs.
I think it's from one of your dogs.
Yeah.
There it is. Got it. Okay. Yikes.
Just keeping you on the toes.
Come for the podcast stay because you choked to death on dog hair. I've forgotten where my train of thought was going.
They're border collies there. That's their life.
Yeah, there's plenty of that around. But what is really, really awesome is feeling like there's actually good stuff to talk about.
There is. So tell me with yours, because I'm setting this up for myself.
The good news. Yes, we start the episode with good news. Well, okay, so speaking of, there's lots of good things happening in the world. And I decided on the 4th of January this year, well, it was when I started. I decided last year. But on the 4th of January this year, I went, right, I'm going hell for leather. Yeah. I'm just going all out. Because there's good things happening. The Trump inauguration wasn't far away at that point in time. I'm expecting some good things. Is he going to deliver on everything? I don't know. He is delivering on a lot more than I thought he would, but that's a topic for later. But I thought I'm just going to go hell for leather and become just a full-time content creator instead of just doing it as I go about my business.
So you're going to tell us about your skincare routine, or?
No, I have nothing to sell. Well, I mean, I have t-shirts to sell, although this was a limited edition. For those of you that have one of these, well done. You cannot buy them anymore. This was exclusively for people who were there. But I am now reaching over 1 million people a day on Facebook.
That's insane.
It is absolutely nuts.
Do you know what the breakdown is, if it's Australians versus...
It is still majority Australian, which is good. Like, I'm an Australian commentator and I want to talk about Australian stuff. But I do want to grow in the US market as well. So about 50% of my growth is US. Yeah. But the vast majority of my actual audience is still Australian. But to give you some reference, in December last year, I reached 1 million people in the entire month.
Yeah.
Now I'm doing that every day.
That's exponential growth.
No, that's
done,
insane.
people.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And I see, kind of related, similar topic.
I'm a bona fide YouTuber now.
You are a YouTuber. Congrats.
I have been wanting to do this for so long, and I started doing the pandemic, and for obvious reasons, I stopped. And then I
don't know, Carly. I haven't heard about those. Why don't you... No.
What could it be?
Yeah.
And then I just, I always wanted to do YouTube, but I guess the thing that held me back about it was, was I going to say anything different? It's such a saturated platform. I feel like there's heaps of people out there. And for those who don't know anything about my journey, I am a graphic designer by trade. That's what I went to uni for. But I'm a self-taught photographer. And I often say that I graduated from a school of YouTube. So everything I know about photography, I literally have taught myself. And then I realized that I'm the second generation YouTuber now. As in, I grew up with YouTube, learning from YouTube, and now I'm giving back to YouTube.
Yeah.
And so, for those who also don't know, I'm doing my master's at the moment, and it's all in beauty standards, AI, self-esteem. And I put up my first proper video about it yesterday, and it's a totally different platform. This is fun. This is conversational.
Yeah.
But YouTube videos...
It is its own beast. It is its own sub-universe.
They are a lot of work. And also, just FYI, guys, I'm the one that edits this podcast. I don't know anything about video.
Okay, so there's a story here. I edited the first 2. And my background is video, and so I know how much work goes on to edit even just a relatively straightforward hour-and-a-half long podcast.
You think it's straightforward?
And after the second week, I ran into some problems because I hadn't done it in a long time, and I had to remember some things. And Carly very naively says to me, I can do the edit. And I went, yes, please.
Yeah.
Because I do know how much work is involved. And you've been regretting that sentence
It's just
ever since.
There's so much to it, and you think the programs will be simple. They're not. But then you have to wait for everything. You got to wait for it to do this, and you got to wait for that.
The
and you
amount
wait for
of
it to
data that
upload.
you're dealing with and transferring, the amount of processing time required.
Yeah.
So I used to do wedding videos back in the day. And it always used to irk me because the wedding videographers were all very pretentious. Like, it was all about them and how much more talented and skillful and artistic they were than the videographers. I'm like, you have absolutely no idea. And you don't know what you don't know. Like, there is no way I can communicate to you just how incredibly pretentious you sound right now. And so I gave up. But it's kind of funny watching a photographer now try and do video stuff and being like, ha, 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 ha.
They're totally different beasts. And again, the whole YouTube thing, like, I'll get somewhere, I get stumped. Like, we were using CapCut to begin with, and the file sizes of what we do is just too big. Handle it. CapCut just freaks out. So we're back into Adobe Premiere, which I didn't want to use, but hey, here we are. And then just like, how do I do this? And I have to go and YouTube it. Like, this is how you do it. I'm like, okay, cool. So you're just constantly problem solving. And what should take, I don't know, how long should this take me?
Honestly.
It's taken 2 days.
So an hour and a half podcast with a 3-camera real-time edit and then a top and tail. Should be no more than a 4-hour job.
Yeah, okay.
If everything works the way that it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
The problem is that never happens.
Correct. And there's always these different things, and we're giving you guys inside information here, but like the equipment involved in doing things like this, as you'll see every week, it's like a little increase.
The lights are looking great.
The lights are looking
Loving
better.
what you've done there.
Yeah, and like, so we've got grids now.
And do you like our lightning bolt?
We have.
Yeah, we have a lightning bolt.
I
have a backdrop.
We're slowly, we've got new tripods for the cameras. Yeah. We've got microphones coming next week. We've got these lap mics, but there's so much involved, and like, you know what you know until you come up against the obstacle, and you're like, oh shit, how do I solve that? So thank you everyone who's bared with us up until episode 6.
Episode 6, and
cheers to that with our water.
Back to the good news. You are a bona fide YouTuber.
I am, and you should go and watch it and subscribe. And also all of Topher's trolls.
Carlz J Soda.
Can you please jump on my video? Like, we both upload the same video.
Keep trolling me.
And you're giving him all the engagement, so no problem with you hating on us. Just do it on my channel, please. Like, I need that. So what do you need to get monetized? You need 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 views.
No, 4,000 hours.
So that's it. If you want to watch this and go hate on it, which is one of our favorite trolls.
Just clicking replay until you've watched it. Well, I mean, if it's a 2-hour episode, you just got to watch it 2,000 times.
Yeah, on
and she
my
can get monetized.
account.
Yeah. All right, fine. You can have the trolls.
I said that to one of your trolls, and he didn't write back. I don't think. I was like, literally, you're paying Topher right now.
Yeah, correct. Correct. This is why I rile them up. This is why I get into. You'll see me on Facebook and on YouTube. Not so much on YouTube, but certainly on Facebook. I'm in there riling them up, and they can't. Like, I even tell them in the comments. I'm like, you are feeding my algorithm right now. Thank you. Please keep coming back. And they can't help themselves. They come back and comment again.
Yeah. It's like an addiction. But, all right, so we've got so much to go into. I'm literally looking at the page notes. This is so long. But do we want to start with serious, or do we want to ease into it?
Okay, we should start with the thing that you told me about, because I've been on the train this morning and I wasn't aware of this. And this seems pretty sick.
Yeah,
whether it's true or not, this is pretty sick.
No, this is real. This is all happening.
No, but as in whether they're lying or not. This is pretty...
So this is all breaking right now, and I've gone online and just gathered what I could find. So, take this with a grain of salt. This is just what's breaking as we're literally recording this podcast. But essentially, 2 Australian healthcare workers have been dismissed for threatening Israeli patients. So essentially what it is 2 healthcare workers, I'm just going to read from this so I get it right. 2 healthcare workers from the Bankstown Hospital in Sydney were caught on live streamed video, which I just don't understand.
Yeah, how does that happen?
Making threatening remarks about Israeli patients. One of the workers stated they would refuse to treat Israeli patients, while another explicitly stated he would kill them. The individuals were wearing New South Wales health uniforms, suggesting they're employed at the system. We've already had a statement coming out from the New South Wales Health Minister, Ryan Park, who condemned the comments as vile, dehumanising and unacceptable. An immediate investigation has been launched by New South Wales Health, and the New South Wales Police are now involved. They've been identified, they've been stood down, and the investigation is naturally ongoing. This is only breaking right now. And basically stated that if the allegations are confirmed, the individuals will be permanently removed from New South Wales Health, and I hope criminally charged if any of what they've said is true.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got responses from the Jewish community, and it goes without saying that there's complete outrage there. But I think what this shows is that we're at a point in not just about the Israel and Palestine thing, but just in the culture in general, where people are so emboldened to just be hateful because they feel like there's no consequences.
It's fascinating to me. So Rukshan and I attended one of the initial pro-Hamas rallies in London shortly after the October 7th attacks.
I got caught in that with your wife.
Yeah, correct. We were over there for ARC. We were doing coverage for ARC. And I remember at the time, and obviously I couldn't say a lot to Rukshan while we're in the crowd because it's not a safe place for me to be if I get recognised. But I remember saying to Rukshan, they are billing this as a pro-Palestine rally, but there's a very thin veneer before it is clearly just an anti-Jew rally. And they say, no, we're not against Jewish people, we're against the Israeli state.
Yeah.
Like, we're against Zionism and so forth. It's like, no, that is your veneer. There is a very, very vicious, very real racism that sits underneath this. And when you see something like this, I would love to talk to people who are very much anti-Israel in the Israel-Palestine conflict and say, listen, where do you stand on this? Because this isn't about the Israel-Palestine conflict. These are Israelis living in Australia whose individual politics aren't necessarily known to these health practitioners, and they are threatening them with either a denial of care or outright murder simply because of their genetics and their race.
Yeah. It's pretty sick. I'm just looking at X now as we're talking to see if there's any updates. And I mean, it's too early to sort of say who these people are and what they're doing, but the video is sick. You can see it on X. It's live. It's two people clearly from Arab descent. I'm not going to speculate on who they are and what they did, but the way that they, like the woman's leaning into the camera, just making this death threat, like, we will kill you, you deserve to die.
Who are they? Were they just talking to each other? Because I haven't seen this video.
So I'll bring it up so you can see it. So you got context. So where are we? It's really terrifying. Like, not take the Jewish thing out of it.
Were they threatening a Jewish person?
Good. Are you a nurse, a doctor?
I'm a doctor, my man.
A doctor? For what?
In hospital.
So this is Israeli?
Where are you from?
I'm from Israel, from the Holy Land.
You know what? I'm going to be really honest with you.
All right.
I'm going to be really honest with you. You actually got a really, really beautiful eyes.
Thank you.
But I'm so upset that you're Israeli. Like, eventually you're going to get killed and you're going to go to Jahannam, inshallah. But like, these pretty eyes, they should stay in this world for long.
Wow.
Why do you think I'm going to get killed?
It's Palestine's country, not your country.
How are you? What's your name?
One day, your time will come and you will die the most...
I'm sorry, what the actual fuck makes anyone...
Listen to me.
Wait for it, he does.
And
When your time comes...
How are you doctors? Wait.
I want you to remember my face.
Okay.
So you can understand
Gotcha.
that you will
I have
die
a question,
the most
though.
disgusting death.
All right, for sure.
The
I have
most
a
disgusting
question.
death.
I have a question. Let's say an Israeli. God
I won't treat
forbid.
them. I won't treat them. I'll kill them.
You'll kill them? So if an Israeli is in Australia and God forbid something happened to him and he comes
Not
to your
God forbid,
hospital,
I hope to God.
would you kill him?
You have no idea how many Israeli Khara dog came to this hospital and I sent it to Jahannam.
Did you see that?
Really sent it
Yeah.
to Jahannam.
Vile,
Okay.
dangerous.
Full credit to Rebel News and to Avi Yemeni, who we were just watching there. So Avi does amazing work. Rebel News, thank you for all your work internationally. Holy
I actually don't know how to
shit.
respond to that, and like I don't really want to respond to it on camera because it's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't games anymore. Like, people treat the internet like it's some kind of fucking video game. Like, this is real life. These are real threats. These are real people.
I tell you what, it really puts the truth to that phrase, never again is now. So there's a campaign group that are campaigning under this slogan, never again is now. So after the Holocaust, the Western world kind of swore never again. We're never going to forget what happened and we're never going to let this happen again. And never again is now. That's literally death threats on the basis of your race on the other side of the planet from where that conflict is happening.
Yeah. But this is across the board. Like, this is beyond politics now. This is culture. People feel emboldened to do this. Like, we can conflate this with so many other issues that are popping up. But like, the thing that's really frustrating me is that we can talk about this in this podcast and then that's it. That's the end of it. I don't know what collectively has to happen. It doesn't need to be some kind of fucking horrendous thing that unfolds before all of us start to go, well, this is going too far.
Sorry for both of our language. We normally try not to swear, but that warrants that reaction. So this really is a challenge to my libertarian ideals of free movement and so
Free
forth.
speech.
I mean, free speech. I mean, I'm glad they said that because now they've been identified. So I would actually argue that that's a demonstration of why people should feel emboldened to speak, because I want to know who these people are, where they are. I want them to out themselves. But I just, I mean, they made very clear what their motivation was and why it was. It's a religious thing for them.
Yeah.
Gosh.
What really frustrates me is, and I have tried to abstain from commenting on any of this stuff because I have really good friends who are Jewish. I have really good friends who are Arab, and both of them are heightened of this, and they're both posting prolifically on socials. Yeah. And like, I can't win. There's like, it's not about winning. That's the wrong phrase, but as in like, what could I possibly say?
You can't move. You can't. Breathe.
There's no movement here that I could take that would satisfy either of them. Yeah. And I see something like that, and obviously, if I want to comment on that, to support my Jewish friends, then my Arab friends are going to be like, "Oh, this is, this is a psyop. It's not real." And and I like all of this aside, and any of you guys watching this, can you just fucking, sorry to swear, but just stop for a minute and realize this is where we're at because we have become so intolerant of each other. This is literally what lockdowns have done. The heightened politicization of everything. To be fair,
this conflict has been around for...
No, as in like people speaking like that so openly.
Yeah.
Like now people are emboldened, and it's happened because people are so divided. Prior to that, people were probably a little bit more clandestine with the way they spoke about things like this.
Look, we need to come back to that next week because it is unfolding. There's a lot that we don't know. So
it's a lot.
Shocking way to start the episode.
Yeah.
But, let's.
So that's. Yeah.
Have you got anything happier? No. Actually, it would feel really wrong.
Do you know what
hey, let's everybody have a happy conversation.
I think that there is happy, but let's move to something maybe a little more lighthearted because we can joke about this one. So my friend Taylor Swift got booed at the Super Bowl.
What a tragedy. What a tragedy. Oh, look, you know how closely I follow Tay-Tay. I just follow every single move she makes. I've got her flight tracker on my phone. I just want to know where she is at all times. So what's interesting is, I posted about this.
Yeah.
And then immediately I had trolls in my comments saying, oh, well, Donald Trump got booed as well. So then I followed their links to their videos.
You really didn't, but okay.
I can hear it maybe. But remember, he's a politician with a 47% disapproval rating. You put 100,000 or 10,000 people into a stadium, you're going to get thousands of people who don't like him. That's inevitable. That's to be expected. Compare Tay-Tay last year and this year. That's the shift. And that's what I was pointing out in my post. The difference between last year and this year, the significance of that is huge.
I thought this was really interesting for a couple of reasons. I think it's not as deep as people thought. Like, I was happy to take the mickey out of Taylor because this is what happens when you become like this gargantuan statue of, celebrity culture. Like, you inevitably fall. No one can maintain that mantle.
No one can stand on that pedestal.
No. But I did think it was really interesting because obviously a lot of the left-wing talking points have been about misogyny, no less. Yes. So Glamour magazine, prestigious reputation, of course, have interpreted the booing as a reflection of increasing misogyny, suggesting the crowd's reaction was influenced by broader societal tensions exacerbated because of Donald Trump, no less.
Wow. I mean, ChatGPT writing for the win.
It couldn't have possibly been that she was there for the Chiefs and it was a predominantly Eagles crowd. And also, like, no offense, guys, it's NFL. No one gives a shit about Taylor.
Yeah, correct.
I'm swearing too much in this podcast.
And it's also that thing of, and broadcasters contribute to it as well. So I was in the US and I watched the NFL with an American family in their home in the US last year. And they kept cutting to Taylor freaking Swift. And I'm sorry, we're not there for Taylor Swift.
No.
They weren't hating on Taylor Swift. They just wanted to watch the rotten football.
And we don't need the constant, throw to her in the crowd with her celebrity mates.
I think the second year of that, you throw that up on the big screen, and everyone's like, oh, come on, really?
Yeah. Well, I thought this was interesting, right? Because I've been talking about this for a while, like the chaos unfolding around celebrity culture. And this is a big part of my master's thesis.
Epstein list by the end of next week. That's my prediction. We'll have it by the end of next week.
Desperate for it.
Yeah.
So I've been calling this for a long time now. And a lot of my deep dive, I've been going back into the archives of the early 2000s, late 90s, because you have to start somewhere. And looking at kind of when celebrities ascended to just being like gods. And this is actually a recent thing. You always had those elusive Hollywood types. And, prior to social media, didn't really know a lot about them. The odd paparazzi photo, the odd scandal. But for the most part, they were kind of, mysterious.
Yeah.
Then you have magazines where they were constant tabloids. So you think about, I know I'm really pushing you for knowledge here, Nicole Richie, Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears, that was the 2000s.
Heard of them, I think, yeah.
They were all over the tabloids. Everyone was following their every move. That's when the paparazzi culture really just exploded.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you had social media got rolled out.
Which gives you this perception of connection to these people. And I think that's what's changed.
Correct. So now you got to go behind the closed doors with him. You got insider access and behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And what that's done is made people realize that a lot of these celebrities are either vapid, completely like out of touch. They are sheltered from the realities of the real world.
Yep.
And you got to remember, most of these people live like in the hills of Hollywood, you know, in Calabasas or whatnot.
Yeah.
Just a few kilometers away is Skid Row.
Yeah.
Like, it's just that I can't help but like juxtapose it across to the Hunger Games. It really is the capital versus district, whatever it is.
Don't ever go driving past Sunset Boulevard at the wrong time of day. It will break your heart because, you know, Sunset Boulevard, I'm a musical theatre guy, you know, wonderful songs about it and this mystique about it. And then you get there and A, it's just not that interesting. It's not that impressive. And B, not a nice place at the wrong time.
I made the mistake. This was like, when did I go? 2012 was the first time I went to Los Angeles as a kid. I've been to America a lot of times. And I was looking at the map, and this is like, you know, early days of social media, and I was there with friends for a wedding, and it said the fashion district, and I was like, oh, well, obviously that's where I want to go.
Yep.
In my mind, I was thinking like, that's, you know, where all the shops
The designers,
are. No, that's like a market, and that's literally the bad end of LA. That's like rough as guts.
And the rough end of LA is rough.
Well, when we were in the taxi at the time, there was an Uber. He said, "Can I ask girls like, why do you want to go here?" And I was like, "Oh, because it's a fashion district." He's like, "No."
Yeah.
He's like, "I will drive you past it, and you can have a look. And if you want, I'll turn back around and we'll go somewhere else." And we got there, and of course, this is prior to all the encampments and stuff, but it was still really rough. And sure enough, you just see the community change. And I said to him, like, "What is it?" He's like, "This is the bad part of LA. This is probably the bit you don't want to be here, especially as young Australian girls."
Yeah.
He's like, "Tell you what, we'll take you to Hermosa Beach and you can get like the proper California." And then that was it. But yeah, I was like, you know, you kind of go into things a bit blinded. And then a few years later, I used to go every year for the CrossFit Games, and a friend of mine, and this is again stupid, but this is what you do when you're young. We decided we wanted to drive through Compton. We just wanted to have a look.
Yeah.
And so for those who haven't been to LA before, the only way to move around LA is the freeways. It's not like in Melbourne where you just cut through suburbs. No. And we were thinking like, you know, Compton, the next suburb. You have to make a deliberate turn to go off into there. And all of a sudden, we're in Compton. And let's just say we got out of there real quick. It just... I don't want to play it up, but there's a mood shift. You know, there's people on the corners and you just go, I'm actually not...
You're being looked at very specifically by the kinds of people you don't want to be looked at.
Yeah.
I had this experience when I went with a team in 2013 to do a documentary in the US.
Yeah.
And me and two young people with cameras and blah, 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 we land in Washington, D.C., we go to pick up our rental car. They've upgraded us to a bigger car, which was lovely. We had this lovely, big, brand new Toyota Land Cruiser, which was well out of our budget, but that was what they gave us, so thank you very much. All shiny, of course, straight off the car lot, the rental car lot. And we start driving, and I miss my turn off. And so I take the next exit from whatever we were on, and that took us onto Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Something I have learned is that in every American city, people like you and me don't drive shiny, expensive cars down Martin Luther King Boulevard. It's just not something that you do. And so we pull off, and immediately my camera girl in the back is like, I don't think this is the right place. We're driving along, and it's just every head is on a swivel.
Yeah.
And they're all looking at you, and most of them, I'm sure, are perfectly fine. But amongst them are some people who are not.
Yeah.
And you know it, and you feel it.
And for all our Americans watching, like, I love America. I've been over 10 times. I've been a lot as a kid.
If I couldn't live in Australia, I'd live there in a heartbeat.
I would love to be adopted by a Texan, just letting you know. Me and my partner.
Yeah,
we want to move to States.
I don't know if that makes it less weird or more weird.
Yeah,
actually,
I don't know.
But, you know.
Take that as you will. Do you know why I love America? We're both car people. I just want a big Dodge Ram TRX, and I just want to rip down the streets and just America. That's what I want to do.
I find it so funny when all the inner city latte sipping whatevers get all up in arms about F-150s being on our roads. And like, oh, these monstrous American trucks.
They're little babies.
I'm like, you drive that down the street in America and call it a big tough truck, you were going to get laughed at.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have dualies, it's not an F-350, come on.
I was like, do you know what, it's funny? I went to, I was in the in two minds of buying a new car. Long story for another day. But I went to the Jeep dealer and I test drove the new Wrangler. I don't even... everyone I know hates Wranglers. Shut up. Shut up. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, and I went and test drove it. And I hate modern cars. I hate the beeps. I hate the lane assist, the slow down when you're doing cruise.
You can blame regulators and bureaucrats for all the beeps and bells and whistles and seatbelt warnings and this and that. No.
I don't care that it's a new car. I don't want it. So I've got a JK, Jeep Wrangler, and I'm going to keep it. My partner was literally working on the engine the other day, and he's like, it's in top nick. It'll keep going. And I was like, brilliant.
Excellent.
I don't want a new car. But in the showroom... was a TRX, like supercharged, Hemi V8. It's big, and I was just like,
I don't think any of this was on our list of topics for today.
Anyway, so I mean, my interest with the whole Taylor Swift thing is like, obviously we're watching the fallout of celebrity culture.
But it's also the overall vibe shift.
Yeah, it is. This is very much like, I keep talking about, I think I talked about in the first episode about the whole Pluto and Aquarius, you know, French Revolution. He rolls his eyes every time I say it.
Yeah.
But this is kind of that. Like, you know, it's the Mary Antoinette.
There's no question there is a revolution happening.
Absolutely. And so another culture thing, which is actually in my notes. I'm just scrolling to it now because it's like 50 pages long. Essentially, I want to talk about the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni thing. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
I am very proud to say that I do not.
Okay, this is important for two reasons. Another Candace Owen deep dive. But this is actually why
Welcome to the Candace Owens secondhand show.
No, this is a big reason why Taylor Swift is falling out of favour.
Okay.
Because with a lot of these Hollywood elites, they controlled fame. They were the gatekeepers, right? And they got to say who sat at this table and who didn't. Yeah. And if you didn't espouse the same ideologies, if you didn't, toe that line...
they want to be seen with you.
Correct. So this is why I'm talking about it, not more from a gossipy point of view. And so Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, you'd know.
I know Ryan Reynolds. Yeah.
They were like a Hollywood it couple. Ryan's I think effectively a billionaire now.
I love their whole dynamic on social media. I've got to say, the Blake Lively Ryan Reynolds thing on social media is hilarious.
Well, you will see that it's now choreographed because it's not real.
Okay.
So
that's a shame because I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Hang on, ignorance is bliss. I don't know. Move on. New topic. I don't want my Ryan Reynolds fantasies to be destroyed.
Turns out he's a bit of a nasty pickle.
Is he?
Yeah, the nasty pickle is what I'm calling him. So essentially, there is a massive lawsuit coming. I'm going to go over this really quickly, so forgive me. But essentially, there was a movie that they made called "It Ends with Us" with a guy called Justin Baldoni.
Yeah.
It was his movie. He had the rights to it. He brought Blake in, and essentially Ryan and Blake tried to take the movie from him and take it over completely. So much so that during the premiere, Justin Baldoni, and his family got put into the basement whilst Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively were on the red carpet. And there's a really
seems odd.
Yeah, there's a really deep subject matter with the movies. It's about domestic violence.
Yeah.
And Justin Baldoni, I would call him a beaten puppy dog. There's something about he seems like a nice guy, but just like a real doormat.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And so he's come at this from like I really want to do the book justice, and I want to talk about domestic violence because it's a real thing affecting women.
Yeah.
But then Blake Lively has turned it into like, everyone wear your flowers, like wear your florals, like look at my hair care. Like she dropped her
She did the celebrity thing.
She did the celebrity thing, right, with a very nuanced topic. And so what you've seen, again, is a revolt against the celebrity because people are like, hey, a minute, this is a book about DV and you're making it all about florals and trivial celebrity nonsense.
And your red carpet appearance.
So now all of a sudden, Blake and Ryan had like, a foolproof like shield around them. They could do no wrong. And now it's come out that, Blake is actually a big mean girl. And Blake, I kid you not, referred to Taylor Swift as one of her dragons, like Khaleesi and her dragons from Game of Thrones. And so now all these text messages have come out. And so Justin Baldoni has put up a website where you can see all of the timeline, all the text messages, all the emails, like full transparency.
Wow.
And these people have been exposed for being corrupt, for being incredibly narcissistic and basically vultures, just taking over things that aren't theirs. And the reason I thought I'd bring this up is now, like I said, there's a revolution happening, but you are now under the spotlight whether you like it or not. The internet is forever.
Yep.
Every move you make is now going to be witnessed by everyone. So, like, you can't hide anymore. And I think these celebrities, Taylor Swift is a good example, they thought they were untouchable. You're not anymore.
And I can understand why they would, because previously someone like a Baldoni would have had to have gone to a journalist who would have had to have had the guts to then take that article to the editor. Then the editor would have had to have agreed
well, this
that they're
is
going to
even
publish
worse.
it. And da.
The New York Times was in on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, I'm giving you the real quick thing.
Yeah.
The Me Too authors, who won the Pulitzer Prize.
Just quiet confession. I'm enjoying this gossip column a little bit more than I should.
I can go. I've got it all in front of me. So the journalists who were responsible for the Me Too movement won the Pulitzer Prize for it. They were in on this whole Blake Lively thing. So it's a big PR battle of he said, she said. But now that Baldoni has put up the transparency with all the text messages, it's Blake is a monster. It is unequivocally. She's flirting with him and then she accuses him of sexual assault. She's saying that, he did this when she was the one that did it. It's gaslighting to the nth degree. And now it's coming out. Obviously, we know now, I'm conflating heaps of issues here, but USAID was giving money to mainstream media outlets.
Yes.
And it just so happens that one of those outlets was the Times, and this is Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, they're Hollywood elite. It's very twisted.
Very incestuous.
And I think it's way too early to know exactly how this unfolds, and I don't even think you can unfold it. I think it's just so insidious, but everyone's now, and I think I said last week, why aren't people angry enough? I don't think you can be yet. I think everyone's just
it's all still unfolding so fast.
Yeah.
Before we move on from that, can I just say, Ryan Reynolds, you broke my heart for the last time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's pretty devastating. But one of the reasons why it's hard for people to be angry is because of how much more is coming out and how quickly all of that's coming out. For example, USAID is old news already because now he's getting stuck into the EPA and we're finding out all of the waste and everything that went on there. Getting stuck into the Treasury. It is literally insane the amount of obvious preventable waste. He goes to the Treasury and finds that Treasury by default have been paying every invoice.
Yeah.
They don't challenge anything. And in their system now, they've found that they were paying invoices that did not contain the correct identifiers, or in some cases, any identifiers. So obviously, to be paid by the US government, you're supposed to be registered with them, have been approved by them, and you get an identifier so they can track all their money. This is basic, this is small business stuff.
Yeah.
So you can track all your money. People are putting invoices in that have none of that information, and they're just being paid by default, and it's in the billions of dollars a year.
When I was trying to bring up, I was trying to bring up all the Doge tweets from the last 7 days, because I'm trying to keep these podcasts to the 7 days. I cannot keep up. This is becoming a full-time job. I'm not a journalist, guys. I'm just literally someone who's this is what I'm
We're just trying to stay across stuff and keep you guys informed and have a bit of fun.
And have a conversation about it. And basically they've released all the information about where a lot of this money was going, and someone made this big flowchart of it started here and then it gets filtrated through all these different businesses and then comes out the other end.
This is actually so important, and I'm so grateful to the person that did that, because this is what corruption looks like in Western countries. I posted about this on social media. Corruption isn't brown paper bags and suitcases full of cash and backroom deals in shady bars. They don't need to.
No.
They can transfer the money in plain sight and have all the paperwork and everything else there. And because they're simply... So we saw the meme about Kevin Rudd getting a certain amount of money from USAID, right? And Kevin Rudd has come out and said, that's not true, that's a false claim, etc. That neither me nor the organisation ever got money from USAID. Well, that is technically true, but you were on that salary $1 million a year. It went via 5 other intermediaries. And so by the time it's done that, who can say which money was from who? So what they've created, and this is entirely on purpose, is a situation where hundreds of billions of dollars are changing hands, and yet simultaneously no one is funding anyone.
It's crazy. I'm just on Doge's Twitter, or X now, and they're tweeting every couple of minutes. It's just crazy. It's millions here, billions there. The most recent one is federal employee retirements are processed using paper by hand in an old limestone mine in Pennsylvania. 700 plus mine workers operate 230 feet underground to process 10,000 plus applications per month, which are stored in manila envelopes and cardboard boxes. The retirement process takes multiple months.
What?
And this is the thing, right? I know there's so many people who are still Trump's evil, right, left. This is not right versus left anymore. This is right versus wrong. And everyone's in on it. These old stalemates, the people who have been in Congress their whole lives, the people who have been, lifetime politicians, they've all benefited from this.
Okay, so I want to segue slightly, but then bring it back. there's a reality in business when someone, a new startup comes in, takes over an industry, and then because they're very profitable, they've got some sort of a competitive advantage, they end up building big infrastructure and new systems that makes them more efficient and even more competitive, and they trounce everybody. But then over time, technology moves on, times move on, customer expectations move on, but these guys, because of the infrastructure that they've built, are now locked in place. And eventually all of that becomes a liability.
Yeah.
And often we can actually see these once prosperous companies get destroyed by the very infrastructure they built during their prosperity. Now, within the economic system, within the capitalist system, we have a solution for that, and that is they end up going bankrupt and someone else replaces them and builds a new set of infrastructure. But within government, the same reality is in place. But it's much more difficult to sweep away the old infrastructure. There isn't that creative destruction process at work. And essentially what Trump is doing now is renewing the American government and systems and processes, and it would appear sweeping away a lot of that old infrastructure, the dead weight, in order to allow it to actually function in the modern world.
There's a lot of people that seem to appreciate that the status quo should never be challenged. And I mean, we're seeing this with the reaction of a lot of the Democrat people. And you're seeing that, and when something I thought was also worth pointing out, when we talk about US politics, a lot of people are like, oh, it's got nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with us. Everything. And particularly in Australia, what's that saying? When America sneezes, we catch a cold.
That's right. And we are downstream of the US. Economically, politically, culturally, we are downstream of the US. And the distance between us is shortening. So it used to be that we were 20 years behind the US culturally. I would argue now we're on average probably only 10. And in some ways, we're actually leading the US. And that's not a good thing, by the way.
Yeah. And you see this unequivocally because, the Democrats will do something and then all of the left-leaning parties in Australia will come out in support of it or talking about it. Like, we're seeing Greens MPs in Australian Parliament denouncing Trump. I'm like, hang on, you're in the Australian Parliament, babe. Why don't you stick to what's affecting us? But it's interesting because you watch these meltdowns from the Democrat leaders, Elizabeth Warren, Maxine Walters, who are sitting there freaking out about USAID because they're using it, they're calling it, you're stopping foreign aid, when really it's just a slush fund for the CIA.
So, but it's not even just politicians. So Bill Kristol's been caught out, famous sort of Hollywood, whatever. He's been caught out because he is in a prominent position in an organisation that receives enormous amounts of funding from USAID. And there he is online being like, oh, this is an outrage, blah, blah, blah. Buddy, you literally get paid by these guys.
Yeah. And this is the great thing about the internet, because obviously you've got a lot of people who are invested in this now, and this is a contagion for the good, right? You've got people who are hackers, you've got young kids who are all over this. And what I love about the pace that Trump and Vance are setting is that there is no way old, archaic mainstream media outlets could ever keep up with this.
Okay, you mentioned Vance. I'm going to move on to what Vance just said in Paris.
Yes.
You may not be familiar with this.
I saw a little bit. It was with the Pope.
So I watched all of Vance's speech, but I don't actually know the bigger context. But it was a symposium on AI. And I thought his speech was absolutely brilliant. I agree with almost everything he said, but even the things I don't agree with from a political philosophy point of view, I'm like, he's doing his job really well as the Vice President of America. And really walking this beautiful line between America first and reaching out and saying, we'll work with you. We want to partner with you. But one of the things that he was really, really clear on was free speech.
Yeah.
Absolute. Censorship, AI cannot become a weapon for censorship. We will not partner with countries that won't allow free speech to their citizens. A really, really clear, one of the clearest I've heard since the election, defense of free speech. And that gives rise to, or that supports my suspicion that the latest round of Trump tariffs, the 25% on steel and aluminium, etc., is actually not about steel. I think it's actually about censorship.
Yeah, I think Trump's just basically trying to reinstate common sense. But just on JD, I think he's phenomenal. Like, his story alone, coming from where he came from to be now the vice president, and he's an incredibly articulate...
Probably future president, to be honest.
I would say so. He's definitely got it in the genes. But I want to point out this, and I've got the tweet in front of me. So JD Vance responding to a Democrat who came out and basically was like, I'll start from the start. In Doge, there was an employee called Marco Elise, and he was a young staffer, and there was a journalist who had received funding from USAID who went after this young staffer and uncovered some bad tweets, right? Racist tweets. And so he stepped down or he got fired, whatnot. And now it's surfaced that, Musk and Vance are coming out and going, well, hang on a minute. Like, we don't want to fire someone just because they made a dumb decision. Like, they should be fired for being bad at their job.
Yeah.
And what I thought the way JD Vance handled this was incredible. So I'll read the first tweet, and this is from Ro Khanna. And so basically he came out saying, so he's a Democrat representative, and he wrote, are you going to tell him to apologise for saying normalize Indian hate before the rehire? Just asking for the sake of both of our kids. Now, Ro is obviously Indian. JD Vance is married to an Indian woman. He has half Indian children. And, you know, he's come out basically saying, like, if you're rehiring this guy who's a racist...
make him apologise.
Make him apologise. Make
him go through the re-education thing.
Correct. And JD Vance's response was just like, you know, chef's kiss. So he came out going, for the sake of both our kids, grow up. Racist trolls on the internet, whilst offensive, don't threaten my kids. You know what does? A culture that denies grace to people who make mistakes. A culture that encourages congressmen to act like whiny children. I cannot overstate how much I loathe this emotional blackmail pretending to be concerned. My kids, God willing, will be risk takers. They won't think constantly about whether a flippant comment or a wrong viewpoint will follow them around for the rest of their lives. They will tell stupid jokes. They will develop views that they later think are wrong or even gross. I made mistakes as a kid, and thank God I grew up in a culture that encouraged me to grow and learn and feel remorse when I screwed up and offered grace when others did. I don't worry about my kids making mistakes or developing views they later regret. I don't even worry that much about trolls on the internet. You know what I worry about, Ro? That they'll grow up to be a US congressman who engages in emotional blackmail over a kid's social media post. You disgust me.
Okay, I've just made a decision. I am moving to the US and becoming a US citizen specifically so I can vote for JD Vance in the 2028 elections.
He is amazing. Like, JD's a millennial too, so it's interesting because he's obviously got a foothold in our culture and like, you know, he's got his temperature on things. Whereas Trump, as much as I love Trump, he's 2 generations above me.
And he's a bulldozer.
Yeah.
He continues on his way, whereas JD Vance is a dancer.
Yeah.
He reacts and responds and maneuvers.
But also you cannot undo what JD does because he lived that life. He grew up in Appalachia. Yeah. He grew up destitute poor with a drug addict mother. Yeah. He's seen horrific things. He put himself through school. He put himself through college. Yeah. I think he went to like Yale and...
Something like that. Yeah.
Like, I don't know your Ivy League school guys. No, I'm but a mere mortal. But you know, like he's categorically like proved that the American dream still exists.
Yeah. 100%,
so hats
100%.
off to him.
And that's beautiful eloquence. And his speech in Paris was superb. I got to 4 minutes in and I tapped the screen to see how long it had been playing for because I felt like I just had a 10-minute download. Like he packs so much in to his sentences. And again, there in that tweet, like, whoa.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's the statesman-like behavior that you wish Trump did.
But statesman-like with principle. See, statesman has become a byword for mealy-mouthed, hedging your bets, fence-sitting. Whereas he is absolutely taking a position in that.
You unequivocally know where he stands.
But it's beautiful.
Yeah. So I thought we'd go from JD across to Sam Kerr since we're talking about free speech.
Because obviously birds of a feather. I mean,
right?
Just, like 100% the same thing.
This one really gets my goat for a lot of reasons.
That surprises me so much, Carly.
I'm such a tolerant individual. You know, because I actually saw your post on this morning and I agree with you. And this was sort of how I was conflating it. Like, Sam Kerr is a racist. She is a hateful individual. And she is in a position of power. She has the world at her feet. She's a soccer star. And
the media on her side.
Correct. And nothing to detract from her soccer prowess. She is very talented. But that has emboldened her to behave in a way that is completely abhorrent to me. And this is no different to, say, your Taylor Swift or your Blake Lively's. It's the same thing. You get to a point of celebrity status where you think you can do anything and you can do no wrong and that you are above the law, essentially. And of course, obviously, she was being tried in the UK and we know what's going on in the UK at the moment. So she's been found not guilty of racially charged...
Now, I agree with the decision of not guilty because even though I do think she's a racist, that's my opinion, I don't think anyone should spend time in prison for being a racist, and I don't think she should either. But what this is going to do is fuel the flames of discontent around the double standard. And this was the point that I made on social media was that there are people, and Andrew Tate being one that I don't like to talk about, but we end up talking about him every second podcast.
Well, he's part of the culture.
He is part of the culture, where he correctly points out the problems and then, in my opinion, prescribes completely the wrong solution. He says there's a double standard, men are being picked on, therefore you should become a real man, and a real man is a shallow, materialistic, hedonistic pleasure seeker. I'm like, I think you kind of veered off.
Yeah.
You kind of lost your way along there somewhere. Yeah. But there is a massive problem. And this is going to fuel that problem because there are white men sitting in prisons in the UK right now for saying things online way milder than what Sam Kerr said to that police officer on camera on that day.
Yeah.
And yet they're doing hard time. When, by the way, they don't have room in their prisons for actual criminals, people stealing things and people, committing assaults. Oh, we don't have room. We're halving sentences. We're doing
Pakistani rape gangs.
We don't have room for them. We don't have room. Stop bothering me with trivial stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody said hurty words.
Yeah.
And yet Sam Kerr gets off. So this is going to be a real inflammatory moment in the UK.
Yeah, and inflammatory is exactly what I was going to say. This bothers me for a couple of reasons because it goes back to what I was saying before about those health workers saying what they said on the internet. People are emboldened now, and if there's no consequences, and I don't know, look, I don't pretend to know the law inside out, but there has to be consequences for behaving like that. Like, who was that person, this is a couple of years ago, they called Adam Goodes a monkey, or like they did something bad
It was a kid in the crowd.
And basically they hung, drawn and quartered that kid.
Tried to destroy his life, yeah.
And he was quite young, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he was certainly under the legal age where they should have even been showing his face on TV, let alone...
And that was public outrage. And then you've got Sam Kerr, who is the captain of the Matildas, now going to play for Chelsea, worth millions of dollars, behaving like that. Like, take away her words, the racist words. Her behaviour, drunk and disorderly.
Reprehensible, yes.
Vomiting in the back of a taxi, swearing and then showing off her bank balance.
Yeah.
Gross.
So for me, you just said, she should be punished. Not if it's for the words, right? But for the behaviour.
For her behaviour,
for puking in someone's taxi, refusing to take responsibility, not sticking around to clean it up, not being willing to pay for it. Like, just... No,
I feel like I should clarify what I mean with punishment. Punishment not necessarily through the jurisdiction, as I think she should lose her job at Chelsea or be stood down. I think that's, because you've got to think about it. You have Sam Kerr now playing for your football team or your soccer team. You're essentially saying that we condone her behaviour. We think she's the right person for the job.
But let me disagree with you because we then have someone like an Israel Folau who tweets a Bible verse. Right now, he does lose his job for a time and has to sue and all the other nonsense that goes on. With all of that, I don't think that we should be saying someone can't play for a sports club or can't be rehired by the US government, to come back to the JD Vance thing a minute ago, because of their outside of work behaviour. She starts showing up to work drunk or underperforming because she's had a big night last night. These sorts of things, well, yes, that's now affecting the job. I'm not convinced that even behaviour that I personally find disgusting from Sam Kerr should actually then be factored in. I'm going to caveat myself here. The fact that soccer clubs are essentially marketing organisations and that doesn't help their ability to attract sponsors, etc. Maybe it all ties into her job performance, but I'd be very careful with that.
Well, it's interesting because imagine if it was a man.
Right,
and we see this from sports players across the globe, most notably here in AFL, when an AFL player
they love to cancel.
Look what they did to Ben Cousins, who I think what they did to Ben Cousins and how that played out was disgusting, but this has happened a lot with AFL players, and we push them up on a podium and then we celebrate their downfall. We love it. It's an Australian part-time, but not with Sam Kerr.
But this is across the culture. If you are being pushed up, know that their time is coming. And in your case, it was less than a week. Where the story becomes, if you're already here, the story of, hey, this person's still where they were before, last time you heard about them. That's not a story. The only story left once you're at the top is the story of your downfall. But the same is actually true in reverse. Once you're at the bottom, the only story left, they're not going to, 2 years later, they're not, oh, well, this person's still at the bottom. That's not a story. The only story left is the redemption arc left to you. So that does actually cut both ways.
It's hard because I look at it and I go, I think that she's a bad example to women for a lot of reasons, but she is a great soccer player, yes. And this is going to travel with me on this one. Chris Brown.
This would be good.
Chris Brown, do you know who he is? The
music dude
the singer.
beat Rihanna? Is that the one? Oh, wow, mate. There you go. I do know some things.
You do know your culture. All right. Chris Brown, he's a black man. He's an American. He is arguably a triple threat. He is insanely talented. Can sing, can rap, can dance, can beatbox, all the things.
Can beatbox.
Beat what? Beatbox.
Beat Rihanna? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Anyway. Right.
I wouldn't call Rihanna box. I think that's a bit vulgar, but
Stop it. Anyway, so that happened. God, that happened a long time ago. I think like in the early 2000s.
Something like that.
Right. And he's never, ever been able to redeem himself. And people go, oh, well, he's acted like a piece of shit since. And maybe he has, but he's arguably insanely talented. He should have won Grammys. He should be at the top of the charts because he sings like butter. Like, he's amazing. But he's never had that. He's never had that afforded to him. Why? Because he beat a woman and that's it. Okay, full story. Then Sam Kerr can behave arguably like a drunken sailor, vomit in a taxi, say horrible things about people, and then basically two fingers up to the media and be like, I can get away with it because I'm a woman and I'm allegedly Indigenous.
But all of this is coming to an end, in my opinion. I think the gap between the double standards is narrowing. There's no question in my mind about that. Will there ever not be a double standard? I'm not so sure. But the gap between those two is narrowing. And a story like Chris, whatever his name was, would not cause the same cancellation today. I'm absolutely.
He beat Rihanna. Like,
yes,
it was
no, I know.
egregious.
It's bad. Like, no, I'm not. But actually, like, have a think about the stories that we've heard and the turnarounds that we've watched happen. So the effort to cancel Johnny Depp, right? Amber Heard has done a terrible amount of damage to the real victims of domestic violence, right? She is called into question the witness of every single woman that claims to be being abused by their man.
I would agree.
For her own financial gain.
I would argue the Me Too movement has done the same.
Me Too movement's done a lot of damage there. The world is changing, and now I'm not suggesting that people should get away with things like that, but the judgment that comes of, well, I would never do that. You might be right, but think about what you thought your life would be like when you were a teenager and who you thought you would be when you were a teenager, and then have a look at who you are now. Has it turned out to be a hell of a lot harder than you expected?
Yes.
Yeah. Has it pushed you in ways that you thought it wouldn't? Have you struggled in ways that you thought you would triumph? I think that's true for all of us, and it looks different for each of us. But to sit there with that kind of self-righteous, well, I haven't done that, I wouldn't do that. It's a little bit like fuck ugly blokes going, well, I never had an affair. It's like, not even your wife wants to do you, buddy. Like, that's... you've turned down 100% of the 0 offers you've ever had, right? So there's this reality. You put someone on a pedestal, you put them in public fame, you put them in the public eye, you put them under the kind of pressure to perform, to make money for the label, to fill stadiums, to blah, blah, blah. You're going to be more likely to get a volatile moment. And I'll say this in defense of Sam Kerr as well. Okay, having a blowout, blackout, drunk night for someone with the amount of attention on her that Sam Kerr has, that happens.
Yeah.
Of course. Did she behave badly? Yes, absolutely. Should she be held accountable for her actions? Yes, absolutely. Should it be held against her for the rest of her life? Definitely not. And I think audiences are maturing and the public are maturing to the point that we're beginning to apply that to more than just the selected, protected few.
What I find interesting about it is, like, she's unwilling to accept fault and have accountability for it, because in her mind, her victim card is the ultimate
Trumps
triumph.
everything. Trumps everything.
Like, that's it. That's a get out of jail free card, And my frustration with that is, like, our view, like, what was I going to say? The way I look at this is, like, if society is going, okay, well, that behaviour is not good, but we're going to allow it because she's a sports star, and I said Chris Brown and all that sort of stuff. What about when the Epstein client list comes out and the Diddy client list comes out? Yeah. Then what happens? Like, there's arguably people doing far worse, I would say, and I would agree. But what is society's attitude towards these public figures? It's got to get to a point where it's condemnation, but also, like, there needs to be some kind of repercussions where they're like, look, you can have that redemption arc. I absolutely believe in that. We love to see that.
But that has to follow the punishment arc. Yeah. Like, it has to follow the taking responsibility, taking your medicine, and now we'll allow you to rise. We'll allow you to move past that. But if you're not even taking responsibility, then I think
she's not.
You're getting stuck there. Yeah, that's what I think is actually happening. If you refuse to acknowledge and take responsibility, then a significant part of the world will not let you move on from that.
Yeah, and I think those double standards are really infuriating, particularly when you, bring it back to the Doge employee. He was young and stupid. He did a stupid thing, and I think he would probably agree. And then when I talked about shame in the last episode. I bring shame up every episode. That public shame actually is really good for that redemption arc.
Serves a function.
Yeah, but if you're not allowing yourself to feel it, or because you're a protected species, there is no shame, then how does that person ever learn that? Yeah. And that's what I think breeds narcissism in a lot of these celebrities as well.
True, but we need to move on.
All right. Sorry. Okay, so, God, where do we go? All right, let's go home for a minute, because this had buoyed me, but then I was having a chat to our friend Emily from Voice for Victoria, and then I was like, So the Liberals have won the Paran's seat in the by-election here in Victoria. Yes. And that is woke Heartland. They've held it for a while. And everyone's like, wow, this is a sign of the times, the pendulum swinging. But Labor didn't run a candidate in Paran.
Okay, so that's actually relatively common. It's more common than I think people realise. I don't know the latest details, but I know when I was first paying attention to this stuff 10 years ago, it was not uncommon for Labor and the Greens to basically deconflict, to get out of each other's way. And so Labor would do it in return for Greens preferences in seats where they really needed it, and in return for potentially other minor party or faux independent candidates, etc. And in return, they just wouldn't run against a Greens candidate in, say, Melbourne or these sorts of ones that the Greens wanted. So that's not all that remarkable. What would be remarkable is if the fact that a Labor candidate's not running caused people to break towards the Liberals rather than towards the Greens. Because what that tells you is that the Labor Party is already unpalatable to those people. They're already on the Liberals' side of Labor compared to the Greens.
Yeah.
And so if they're going to break in that direction, that gives you a bit of a sense of where the Victorian Labor Party are at versus their own voters if they break Liberal. But also, it shouldn't have been close.
Yeah.
It should not have been close. This is a seat held by the Greens for 10 years. You can complain all you want about Labor not running a candidate. This seat has been held by the Greens for 10 years.
Yeah.
And it should not have gotten down to preferences. This should have been an absolute shellacking. Woke heartland. I think there's two potential explanations here. One is the big pendulum swing one. I think there's a degree to which that's true, but that's only a few percent.
Yeah.
Like a big cultural shift is still only a few percent. It's still only 5, maybe 10% of the population. I think it's also a recognition of how unhappy people are about things like people with machetes running down Chapel Street. The amount of crime that they're dealing with.
Oh, don't worry, we'll get to youth crime.
Yeah. The urban blight that has been Chapel Street for 20 years. Well, 20 years ago, Chapel Street was the place to be seen. 10 years ago, it was the place to be stabbed. And they've lived with that urban blight all the way through the last 10 years. And so I think those two things together are probably what's led to this.
I think this is a good temperature temperature check, as all by-elections are. But you also saw a little inkling of this late last year when there was the council elections, and the Green Stronghold, which is that Collingwood, Carlton area, they lost most of their Greens councillors, and that happened for things like that. Remember that swing set? That was a $2 million swing set, and they pulled up all the trees, and then there's not enough grass. And I don't even know the insides of that. It basically is like a Soviet-style playground. They pulled out a really fun, functional playground and put in a Soviet-style playground and took the trees with them. Yep,
in the name of saving the environment and being green. So anything run by socialists ultimately breaks down over time. So people point to Scandinavian countries. Oh, see, socialism can work. Socialism over there is working because it's on the back of really successful capitalism. But over time, it compresses and suppresses that, and ultimately the socialism eats the other. And so it doesn't surprise me that the places in Melbourne that were the first to adopt Greens councillors at their local councils and Greens candidates at state elections, those are now the ones that are pushing the other way. Even as other places are still going towards the Greens, the ones that adopted them 10, 20 years ago, they're the ones going, we actually don't like what we've become in the last 20 years.
I would also argue that the Greens started as environmentalists, and for most of us with a bit of a bleeding heart, you could get around that. But now it's crossed over to supporting jihadists, which
and even their environmental policies don't make sense. So when I ran in Tasmania as a Senate candidate for the Liberal Democratic Party, now the Libertarian Party, one of the voting blocks that I targeted was disaffected Greens.
Yeah.
And a lot of people make the mistake of thinking, Libertarians are the opposite to the Greens. Well, no, the Greens might be an extreme left-wing party, and if libertarianism was extreme right-wing, you'd be right. But actually, they're not on the left-right spectrum at all. They're actually on the other axis. They're pro-freedom. And the Greens, actually, if you look at it, a lot of their policies are pro-freedom. Drug deregulation, no sort of lifestyle regulation around your private life and your personal life. A lot of them are actually relatively economically freedom-oriented in terms of just allowing people to run their businesses, but they might want rules around high taxes or these sorts of things to pay for all the social programs. But actually, there are a number of libertarian threads in there. And once the Greens stop delivering on their environmental promises, which they stopped doing 20 years ago, then anyone who used to be Greens, the old head Greens, actually need to find a new home. And I tried to offer them one and failed spectacularly. I doubled our vote. 4 people voted for us. It was a lot more than that, but it wasn't nearly enough.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of disaffected Greens voters who got on board the Greens project in the 70s and the 80s. So they started in the 70s in Tassie and then went national, I think, in 80s. And they got on board that and they got excited and they said, yes, this is home. And now the Greens have left them.
Well, and I think this is what's happening in broader political shifts as well. Like, it's no longer, left, right, Greens, whatever. It's populace versus elites now. And a lot of this stuff is, the Greens are...
So we're talking about the Greens or like
the Green elite.
Broccoli or...
Shush! I'm making sense. The Greens are literally those inner city elites. They're usually college educated or university educated.
Tend to be higher income.
Higher income.
A little bit more insulated from economic reality.
And that's exactly it. They're very insulated. And they see things like, my favourite thing that the Greens do is they always talk about bicycle lanes in the city, right?
Oh, because we care so much about bicycle lanes.
And they're like, everyone should be riding a bike in the city. I'm like, that's great, but most people commute from an hour away. So you've got people from Sunbury to Berwick who are driving into the city to work, and you want them to just discard their car somewhere and then get on a bike?
And the ultimate logic of that can be seen in London, where Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, put in all of the ULEZ cameras, the ultra-low emission zone cameras, and basically said, if you're rich enough to have an electric vehicle, we'll let you drive in London. If you're not rich enough to have an electric vehicle or not have an electric vehicle that's less than about 6 or 7 years old, then we're going to charge you what amounted to, I think it was 20 Australian dollars a day, something like that, a pretty obscene amount of money. And that's fine if you are so out of touch with reality that you live in a place that has the tube, the metro, or you live somewhere where you can walk or ride a bicycle. But the minute so there are those people who live that life, and then there are the people who make that life possible. Yeah. And they're the plumbers and the tradies and the real workers. Yeah. And those people have to get into the high-rise buildings to be able to fix the frickin' toilet. And they need all their tools. Yeah. And they're going to drive because they can't dream of affording to live within 20 miles of the centre of London. They're 50 miles away, and they're going to drive an hour and 15 minutes to get in there and then be charged $20 for the privilege.
Well, it's interesting you bring this up, actually, because one of my clients is a Greens member. And even though politically we do not align, we work together often. Yep. Anyway, their office is in the city. And we have a good banter about it, and that's just to show that you can get along with someone who ideologically disagrees with you. Anyway, so their office is in the city, and I, as a photographer, I take about 100 kilos worth of gear with me, particularly to do this particular job that she needs. Anyway, so that's, my light bags, my camera bags, it's my light stands, it's all my soft boxes, and all the cords and everything else. And so when I drive into the city, I'm going on CityLink because, I East Link onto the Monash. So I'm in traffic. I'm in traffic for about an hour because obviously you've got to be there at 9 o'clock when everyone else needs to be there. So that's petrol and tolls. Then I need to get into the city somehow and park in undercover parking.
Good luck.
So that's about $60, $70 a day because I'm only there for 3-4 hours. And then on top of that, I then have to somehow get because you have to park in whatever parking that you get into.
And then you need a trolley or something. And
then I need a trolley to get from here and then up into the building. And so what should be a relatively easy process is actually a 2-hour exercise just to start the job.
But to the person who works with a nice slimline laptop that fits in a briefcase.
And in a cute little satchel.
In a cute little satchel and rides their bicycle or takes the train, they cannot attach themselves.
See it.
They're sitting there going, oh, it's outrageous. I have to pay $11 a day for the train.
And that's why, the Greens announced a policy, public transport in the city should be only 50 cents a day. I'm like, I can't use that. So, I will never use that.
And here's the thing. They say, it should only cost 50 cents a day. No. You cannot legislate a change in the cost. You can only reduce operating costs to create a change in the cost. All you're doing is changing who's paying the cost.
Correct.
So what we're saying is people who use public transport shouldn't pay for it. It should be the rest of you who don't use public transport. So now, Carly, in addition to the registration, the petrol, the Centrelink fees, and all the parking costs... CityLink fees and all the parking costs, you're now also paying for the train that you didn't take.
It's insane. And I was talking to my client, and this is something that eventually she agreed with me on. Because the other thing is too, I used to just pull up in front of the building, put the hazards on, grab all my gear, throw it in the elevator, go upstairs, and then do all that. I can't do that anymore because either there's bike lanes or there's...
You will get nicked.
The parking officers, and they're zero tolerance. Zero tolerance. So they're in the Law end of town, so up the William Street end. Okay. There's nowhere for me to pull over. Yeah. So the closest Wilson's parking or whatever it is I think about 600 metres around the corner. Yeah. And that's the closest I can get. So, it can take me either I get one of those big beach carts, which sounds great in theory until you realise actually wheeling one of those through the city is not easy at all. No. You got to go up and down stairs, and then it's just like. And I said to her,
even just wonky footpaths, just paths that are on an angle. When
you're also still pulling 100 kilos a year. Correct. It's no different to like just putting it on your backpack. And it's gotten to a point where I now have said to my clients, still happy to do it, but it's now full day rate because when I factor that all in, like I might only be with you for an hour or 2 hours.
Yeah, but you've lost 6.
But I just cannot. I can't operate either that or come to my studio out in the burbs.
Yep.
You know, but that's the result of really poor policy.
Not if it's more than about 5 kilometres. Like if it's on the other side of that ring of parks around the city, around the CBD, no, I couldn't possibly.
I get told all the time I live so far away. I'm like, are you joking? Yeah. I literally live in the city of Melbourne. But
so I lived in Fitzroy for a number of years, and I loved it, by the way. I call that my 4 years of living behind enemy lines. It was actually really fun, and I was a dancing instructor back in the day.
This is why it's become such a knob.
Back when I was cool, I was a dancing instructor, and all the salsa dancing clubs were there. Then got married, moved to Dandenong.
That's quite a juxtaposition.
Crime central. Had kids, had to move out to Berwick. That house sucked. When we wanted to change house, everything was more expensive, so we moved out to Officer. And we realised that if we keep going like this, we're going to end up living in New Zealand. And that's unacceptable because we were just moving in that direction way too rapidly. So that's why we left the state. We went north instead.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with us. Like I was living in Hampton, which I loved the lifestyle there. I was close to the beach and I loved everything about it. But I was getting priced out of the suburbs. So my landlord, when the what do you call it? The tax on land tax came in. When the land tax came in, obviously it affected my landlord because it was their second home or second investment property. They upped my rent by $60 a week, and it was already high. And I was like, I bit back and I was like, hey, come on, that's too big. Yeah. And then they put it down by $30, so it went up by $30. And then all of a sudden I get this notice of sale, like they're going to sell. So we went through this whole process, and I'm still really dirty about this because my partner and I only just met. And then all of a sudden it's like, I have to leave my house. And I'm like, so, well, it's good. We moved in together. It was all great. But it was all like...
and they lived happily ever after.
And we were in a great big house and whatever. But at the same time, I was like, it's all happening at the same time. Yeah. It was so much pressure. And, so I went and started looking at other houses, and I was completely priced out of the market. Like, for a 2-bedroom unit in Hampton, I was looking around the $800 mark. And... yeah, whether or not I can afford it is irrelevant. It just gets to a point where it's
Can you justify that?
That's insane. That's insane money. We're talking like almost $40,000 a year. So,
actually, more than. Yeah.
And so anyway, long story short, my landlord bought that unit in the height of the pandemic, so 2021, bought it for a really high price and then couldn't sell it at that. So it got passed in. And then they couldn't sell it. So in the end, they booted me out so that they could up the rent by $130.
Okay, so let's talk about perverse incentives, because this is something that Queensland has tried to do and others have tried to do. Rent controls. Price controls always backfire every single time. There are no exceptions. You cannot defy the laws of economics any more than you can defy the laws of physics. So when the government comes in and says, we'll just pass a law that puts a cap on how much you can increase rent, but you can advertise it for whatever rent you want for a new renter, and there's no control, there's no condition on that. Instantly, you've created an incentive for landlords to do exactly that. I can't raise my rent on you as much as what the market says my place is worth, so I'm going to get rid of you so I can put somebody else in. And now, not only are you paying higher rent somewhere else, but you also have all the costs associated with being forced to move.
Yeah, it was real, and to move house, it was $11,000. By the time that was just my share. My partner had his share. So by the time I had paid, rent and bond at the new place, and paid for moving costs, cleaning costs, all the things, it's such an extraordinary cost if you haven't budgeted that was going to happen.
And then there's the opportunity cost of the time, the week or so that you lose, packing up the old house, setting up the new house, etc. So it's an incredibly expensive, disruptive.
It was, and also the lack of thought or compassion from the real estate agent. I just found it really cavalier.
For them, it's just always happening. It's just you're just a piece of meat in a machine.
Yeah, they couldn't give a shit. And I'm just one of those people that just can't help it. I had to write my little email. I was like, I am absolutely going to be that old cranky woman.
I'm looking forward to getting old because it is socially acceptable to be old and grumpy.
Yeah.
It's not socially acceptable for me at my age to be as grumpy as I am.
I'm halfway there. And I feel like this podcast is so cathartic for me because a lot of these issues I talk about, we're going to get into youth crime in a second, but I thought I'd mention this as well. So everything's politicized now, even though we don't want it to be. It's undeniable fact. I left Hampton, moved into my new house out in the burbs, and I'm still in Bayside. And this is meant to be, I don't want to say where I live for obvious reasons, but it's meant to be a really quiet suburb. It's very family orientated. I saw kids on bikes playing bin cricket the other day. You know when you get the street cricket? Anyway, we had been in this suburb less than 2 weeks, and that was when we had the home invasion and our car got stolen. And for obvious reasons, like I'm still really angry about it. But we'll get onto youth crime in a second. But there's a community group, like, you know, you've got old Facebook groups, and then there's a WhatsApp group. And so in the WhatsApp, I have been observing, and then it gets to a point where I can't observe anymore, and I have to. It's like, I have no self-control. It just has to come out. Anyway, they're talking about youth crime, and they're talking about like, oh, it's not good. It's not great. This is kind of what I said last week. So then I put in like my little testimonial. I'm like, hey guys, as someone who literally had her house burgled and car stolen, let me tell you what it feels like. And I just let rip. And a lot of people, I think, were kind of shocked that someone in there, because like, the thing is, you know, the pearl clutches are like, oh, it's terrible. But like when you actually have someone there who unequivocally can speak from first-hand experience, it's kind of like, oh, shit. Didn't realise she was in here.
Yeah, they're empathising in the third person.
Correct.
They're not actually understanding it in the first.
Yeah, like don't tell me how to feel, mate, because I went through it firsthand, and let me tell you how it feels. Yeah. Anyway, so then, you know, that kind of a few people got their feathers ruffled, like, oh, geez, like, oh, it's not good. Anyway, now there's been a conversation, and as I like to, how do I describe this about my personality? Let a cat amongst the pigeons.
Set a cat amongst the pigeons.
Yeah, it's very much me, like, light a match and just, oops. Yeah. You know, that's very much.
Oh, that's an interesting fire you've got there. It would be a shame if someone tipped a jerry can on it.
Ooh, that win.
You know, I'd never observed that about you before.
That's very much me.
I'm so surprised to hear that.
Anyway, so I've been in that group now, and every now and then I pipe up. And then the other day I just couldn't help myself. Like, someone was talking about, oh, you know, these parents, and I was like, this is not the parents. This is beyond parents. This is the judicial system. This is the government. This is directly the government. Yeah. And then, of course, I got accused of politicising it. I'm like, tell me how it's not political. We've had a Labor government for the better part of 2 decades. It's their fault. Like, they are the ones that could change it tomorrow, and they are not. And so now I got banned from that community group.
Oh, tut.
So, hang on, it gets better, because I revel in this stuff. I'm really good at writing one of those, like, CUNT emails. Like, you know, it's very professional, but like, anyway. So I wrote this email to the head, and it turns out the head of our community group is Labour-leaning, and you can tell this from the X post, the LinkedIn post, and of course the Instagram post. Photos with Jacinta Allen, everything's like pro-Kamala Harris, the whole bit, right? And it just so happens this person has an Order of Australia medal, so therefore is far superior to little old me.
Oh, of course. Yes.
And I know nothing.
Yes.
So this person could do no wrong.
Yes.
And
it's a big club, but you're not in it.
Correct. Yeah. And I wrote a letter, and I basically said, how can you, someone who is a community leader, turn around and tell me that as someone who lives in this suburb, I'm no longer allowed to have a voice because it differs to your ideological viewpoint. And I was like, I'm speaking from first-hand experience. I'm the one that had their house broken into, and you're telling me that I can't express my views on the matter that you're all talking about. I'm not allowed to actually input in that.
In the page that exists for the community that I'm a part of.
And anyway, he came basically and said, oh, it's because I was making it political. I'm like, can you please point out where it was political? Please point out what I said that was like, you know. And he's like, oh, when you talked about the government, I was like, I didn't say Labor. I didn't say Daniel Andrews. I didn't say Jacinta Allen. I just said the government. And it is the government. Literally, it's the government.
Law and order is something that we've been told to hand over to the government. And that was the whole, like, you don't need guns because you can call the police.
So you want to talk about youth crime, but you don't want to talk about the exact reason it's been exacerbated. Anyway, so it turns out this person is actually at odds with the, what do you call it? I was going to say co-op. It's not a co-op. What do you call it?
The HOA, the
owners organisation.
Owners corporation. Yeah.
So it's got the whole suburb has an owners corporation, and so the owners corporation reached out to me, and they're like, "Hey, love what you're saying, and you are a breath of fresh air because so many people are fed up with this guy because he will basically squash anyone that politically doesn't align with him.
Yeah, doesn't align with him.
And you've really challenged him, and you've like everyone in the community is like, ooh. Anyway, so the long and short of it is, I think. You know, I talked about last week, like, why aren't people angry enough? I think it's because people have gotten to a point of just, like, you know, disdain, but also apathy. Like, oh, what can I do about it?
This is the thing. We've seen the problems for so long, and we haven't seen anyone able to successfully really change it. And so there is a sense of just, well, if I can't change it, if I can't affect the outcome, what's the point of me wasting energy? Yeah. It's a thing called rational ignorance or rational apathy. Don't invest energy into places where it doesn't do any good. But of course, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If none of us invest energy, well, then of course nothing changes. And so it takes those few crazy individuals to say, damn it, I'm going to speak up anyway. I don't care if I can't change. That was like us during COVID.
Yeah.
Did we have the power to make things better? No, we didn't, but we were going to speak up anyway.
Yeah.
And by doing that, we then helped to inspire other people and ultimately formed a movement. But that movement would not have formed were it not for that handful of idiots who were willing to waste their energy speaking out when you can't fix
Probably
this.
because I wasn't allowed to work.
Well, yeah.
Idle hands are the devil's playground.
Well, this is where I have the phrase in one of the chapters in my book is it sucks to be right early, but that's the only time when it matters.
Yeah.
It's because when you're early, you have to throw your energy into that thing when it's a waste of energy.
Yeah. And you're seeing that now because, I think the youth crime thing is snowballing. I think it's undeniable now. It's definitely an election issue.
The opposition have now made it an election issue.
But I think what you're seeing now is like sometimes you need that antagonist, and that's what people call me, and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm just someone that, I don't mince my words. And I think that jars people, and I don't apologise for that, because sometimes you need that. You just need someone to come in there and say it like it is. And all the pearl clutching is just redundant, because you're never going to get anywhere if you sit there and you're like, mind your P's and Q's, be politically correct. That's why we're in the position we're in.
Correct.
And so, I just thought it was really interesting, because we're seeing now everything sort of grabbing momentum, and I'm just interested to see what's going to happen with the next election. I mean, we've got the federal election, probably April, May?
It's looking that way. I thought it would have been announced by now. My prediction was that it was going to get announced on Australia Day.
Do you think they're waiting for the whole Trump Albanese thing to calm down?
I wonder, no, not that specifically. I wonder whether they assumed, because this is the sort of thing that they would assume, that the whole Trump situation was going to be a train wreck and completely neuter Dutton. And they're going to be able to attack him with his Timu Trump.
Yeah.
And that's not really coming in their favour.
No, if anything, I think Trump's only making people, again, Trump's a populist. I think most people appeal to that common sense, and you don't have to like the messenger. You just have to like the message.
It's hilarious to me that they're trying to say that Dutton is like Trump. So Labor are saying, don't vote for Dutton because he's like Trump. The Liberals are saying, vote for Dutton, he's like Trump. And anyone with a brain's like, how is he like Trump?
Yeah.
This is not true in any meaningful sense.
No, it's not. And I think Australia is a fair while away from having a Trump. But as you said, we're downstream from the US. So thank God we have Trump and Elon Musk. And I'm so grateful for X, the platform.
Oh.
Because now, I can't tell you how big my following has grown in just the last couple of weeks from my Australian audience who were never really on it. And I think just last week, X became the #1 news app in the Apple Store.
It's happened on and off.
Yeah.
But it's back to #1.
And I think people now are getting to the point where they're like, I need to read this shit for myself. And you're right, you do. You can listen to me and Chris, you can watch the news, but make up your own mind.
The timeliness of it as well. I will see something breaking on X, and I'll be able to get to source documents and videos and blah, blah, blah. And then I will go to Google and Google it and say, news, not a single media outlet has anything out. And it'll be 6 hours later that finally the first breaking news. It's like, where were you guys?
I had that before when I was pulling up the New South Wales healthcare workers. I had to go to X for it because there was nothing on the mainstream media for it.
Yep.
And it was a breaking story. And that's what I was saying, we've talked about this before, how the truth can get around the world, a lie can get around the world before the truth's got its shoes on. Now it's the opposite. The truth is out undeniably. And somewhat in murky waters. I think it takes
There's always the fog of war.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think, once all you need is to sow that seed of doubt.
Yeah.
And once that's done, the mainstream media, there's nothing they can do anymore. They've lost their power.
Now, I don't mean to be that guy, but we've probably only got a half an hour left.
Oh, God.
And we've got a bajillion topics we haven't
We've
talked
got
about.
30 pages. What do you want me to do?
Just pick your favourite topics and let's just blast through
That's not my favourite topic, but we've got to talk about this. All right. Youth crime, I just talked about it.
Yep.
We have to talk about the juvenile offender with 50-plus bail breaches was arrested again over the weekend, bailed again, was reoffending within 12 hours and has been arrested and is now in remand. His kid's 15.
I assume that's probably because after 50 arrests, you get one free. He had the loyalty card all filled out.
It's beyond a joke. And now it's gotten to the point, I've got all the tweets in front of me, and this is, I believe he was the one that was also involved with the two teenagers who crashed in Richmond and hit Jordan Lewis's car. If you look at the photo, this is the middle of a Richmond busy street. I think this is Swan Street or something.
That's not nice.
Got a car on its side. And then you've got Wild New Vision has showed a heart-stopping moment that led to a hit-and-run crash in Richmond. Two teenagers have been charged with a crime spree, which ended in the footy champion's car being totaled. And then you've got furious locals, I talked about this, vigilantes. Furious locals have staged a protest outside the home of a teenager accused of a chilling shopping centre rampage in Melbourne South East. These are the kids that were holding fake guns up to shoppers in the supermarket, in the shopping centre. And they were bailed just hours after being arrested. And I think people are fed up. And I've said this before. This is going to end up with one of these kids getting killed. If not worse.
That's likely, yeah.
And, because this is what happens. You don't want the vigilantes. You don't want your Andrew Tates, but they breed because of this.
And this is directly a consequence of the failure of the authorities that said, hey, trust us, proving themselves to not be trustworthy. And this, you will get a lot of undesirable consequences. There was another headline that I just posted about on all my socials about a guy who got carjacked, stuffed in the boot, and then the drivers were driving around at over 100 kilometers an hour, and he's got the boot open, he's in the back of his own car.
Yeah.
Like, this is the stuff we used to read about happening in Mexico.
Yeah.
Like, this is drug
This is
cartel
third
kind
world
of
shit.
third world nonsense. And yet it's happening in Melbourne, and it's happening so often that people are becoming desensitized to it. Where is the outrage? Now, the outrage is actually really important. You talk a lot about shame. Let me talk for a moment about outrage. We live in a culture where, on paper, officially, judges are supposed to make their judgments and assign guilt and punishment, etc., according to the values and expectations of the community that they represent. Unfortunately, the reality is that judges live in ivory towers. They high-income earners, often living in affluent suburbs, and often quite separated from the realities of the community that they are, whose will they're supposed to be representing. And so it is up to us to actually make enough noise that we can pierce that ivory tower and they can hear us. And, finally, this youth has now been finally remanded in custody and hopefully stays there until actual, court dates and so forth. But
I won't hold my breath.
Yeah, but the only way that this is going to change is if both politicians and judges realise that there is outrage, and the outrage is no longer directed at the offenders, it's now directed at them.
Well, it was interesting because I think I said in an earlier podcast, we're not allowed to question the judge's authority because that's actually in contempt of the law. But a judge's photo got released and they're like, this is the judge who's been bailing these people, and people want blood. And understandably so, I'm one of them. It's really hard to be level-headed in this when you're directly impacted. And, my partner was away last night. He's been away for work. And I joke about us being prison wardens. Our keys, we've got a different key for every point of entry. Yeah. We've got a lock on the garage door. We've got cameras. We've got everything now. And it's getting to the point where, at the end of the night, lock everything up. Yep. And last night I was on my own, and, I'm laying there in my bed going, is this going to be the night they come back? I don't want to live like that, right? And I don't know how you deal with that, whether that's PTSD or whatnot. But prior to this, I never thought like that. It's affecting me every day, and people go, oh, she keeps going on about it. Yes, because that's the impact.
It's violating. It is violating.
Yeah, what do you want me to do? Do you tell a rape victim to just get over it? No.
Now, I'm not in favour of doxing anyone. I don't have a special category. Oh, no, you shouldn't dox judges. No, you shouldn't dox people, full stop.
Yeah.
But I do understand the frustration boiling over to the point that someone does that. And I just sit there and go, then just do your job properly. Represent the expectations of the community that pays your salary and the community that was told, you stay back, you do anything, don't you become a vigilante, we've got this.
Yeah, we know
do
better.
You have this or not?
Yeah.
Because if you haven't got this, there's a lot of people out there quite willing to take over from you. So step the fuck up before something goes really wrong.
I actually have grave concerns with this. I don't think we're going to see any changes to this prior to the Victorian state election. I really don't. I don't think that Labor have it in good conscience to make actionable things that will result in this being...
But judges can take steps themselves. The judges can alter their own internal thresholds.
I don't think they will, because Victoria is still...
whether they will is another...
Yeah, I think Victoria is still very much under the woke mind virus. I really do. And I say that not to be cavalier again, but a lot of this is socioeconomic problems. A lot of this is race as well, or immigrant issues. There is no way a judge in Victoria is going to start going, hey, I'm going to go against the grain here and start locking these kids up, because they'll be ostracised from their own legal community.
It's also the tyranny of low expectations. We have told these people, these young people, time and time again, it's okay for you to be violent. Yeah. You're a refugee from a war-torn country.
It's a get out of jail free card. It's the victim status.
And we reinforce that. And so they then, in their own head, they go, well, the moral standards that apply to everybody else don't apply to me. And they live according to those standards.
Yeah, so I actually don't see, and I hate saying this, I would say I'm fairly intuitive in these things. I think there is, and I don't want to make this prediction, but I think I'm right. There is going to be something that is so horrendous that happens that will make the entire of this state just go, shit. And I think we're talking weeks away. And I don't think it's going to be one of these kids goes and robs a bank, robs a 7-Eleven or something. I think it's going to be one of these kids gets taken out by a community member who's fed up.
Or a gang breaks into the wrong home at the wrong time.
And it's going to cause bloodshed, and I think then there's going to be tensions, and then there's going to be some kind of like, I don't think it's going to be good.
So this is not in our notes, but I've actually been speaking recently to some of the senior police involved in the aftermath of the Cronulla riots up in Sydney. And one of they are discussing a project to try and actually tell the truth about that whole situation, because according to them...
Was that 2010?
That's we're coming up on the 20th anniversary. I think that was 2005.
Yeah, wow. I knew it was
so
a while
December
ago.
2005, I believe that was. And so the narrative is it was a bunch of white racists who didn't like Lebanese people who then went and had a bashing party on. Well, no, that's actually not true. What had happened in the lead up for weeks and indeed months was a lot of the same sort of stuff that we're watching happen in Melbourne now, where there was an identifiable community group of a particular nationality of people who were sexually assaulting women on the beaches, who were violently assaulting lifeguards and so forth on the beaches, who were doing criminal damage to property and being very, very hostile. And then ultimately they bashed a lifeguard quite badly, and that became the catalyst for what's known as the Cronulla riots, the racist riots. And then there were actually reprisal attacks that happened for weeks afterwards of tit for tat between this particular nationality group and the rest of the residents of Cronulla. But we've only been told the race angle on that story. And the reason these people have reached out to me and said, hey, we want to make a documentary, we want to set the record straight. And I'm talking senior New South Wales police people who know the story. They were on the ground. These aren't some skinhead racist yobbos. They're saying we're watching the same thing happen in Melbourne in particular. They said that to me specifically. And because people don't understand the real lesson that needs to be learned from Cronulla, we're watching the same mistakes getting made.
Well, again, it's that whole bleeding heart thing, right? Those sort of woke ideologies are the reasons people don't want to be seen to taking any action, because they don't want to be the first one to do it, because obviously the consequences are dire.
Yeah, they'll get absolutely pilloried.
But like, I'll give you an example. I don't know if you're across this isn't in my notes, but have you seen the, and I say this because it was put on the news, like the Afghan teenagers that bashed a lifeguard, and then they did it again. There was another fight in another swimming centre. So these are young kids bashing a lifeguard
at local pools,
and yet they still haven't been identified. Explain this to me. If you can find anyone on social media, why haven't we found these kids who are bashing kids who are on CCTV? I don't understand it. But this is the thing. And again, I don't think that like you can't tar everyone with the same brush, but that's what happens. That's why these absolutes manifest, because that action isn't taken when it matters the most.
And this is where, even as a libertarian, even as someone who says, yes, we should welcome the world, this is why I stress so hard. And we must apply the law equally to everybody. We cannot have a special category. And if someone starts involving themselves in violent crime, I'm sorry, you're on the next plane back. Like once you've done your sentence here, you're on the next plane back. If you're a minor and everyone wants to say, oh, you can't send a minor back, we'll send the whole family. We'll pay for all of their airfares. No problem. You can all go back if you want to stick with your son. Otherwise, he goes back there by himself and deals with whatever consequences he needs to deal with. You're not welcome here if you're going to bring violent crime.
And I think we've said this before again, but like a lot of these ideologies just aren't compatible with Western culture. They're really not. Like, I was saying this to my partner the other day, actually. I am a beach person. I go to the beach all the time. This year, I think I've been twice. And the reason being, in Mordialloc...
It's because it's just been so hot because of global warming. Haven't you felt that? It's just like, we wouldn't want to step outside. You just catch on fire.
Well, it's been, like, hot enough to go to the beach, but, like, in Mordialloc a couple of weeks ago, there was a bunch of teenagers walking around with machetes, and I'm like, great. It happened in Chelsea. Hampton and Brighton are the ones who are being prolifically attacked with carjackings. And I'm like... I just don't want to be there.
No thanks.
I don't want to be there. And I went to, where did I go? I was at Chelsea or Edithvale, somewhere there. And I went to the gym and I was like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to jump across because it was really hot. And I went there, and I'm not going to sit here and racially profile people, but people who looked Arab. I don't know how else to identify them. But, and they all had jet skis, and they were causing so much chaos. I was like, I just walked around. I just went, no, I don't want to be there. And it was clear that they were all quite drunk, and they were carrying on. There was music blasting, and it wasn't fun. There was something sinister there. And then sure enough, I was walking back to my car, and I saw this big group of Sudanese boys, and they were wearing puffer jackets. And this is a hot day. It was like 36 degrees. Puffer jackets, beanies, and they looked menacing. And then I saw out of the corner of my eye a group of kids. And I just went, nah.
So when we lived in Dandenong for 4 years, and I've never personally witnessed as many violent crimes as what I personally watched unfold while we lived there. We lived in an apartment building with a view over a street that took people between the train station and the Centrelink office. So you can, and there was a drug house across the road. So you can appreciate there was a lot going on, right?
Hollywood movie stuff.
Well, I mean, I've literally, so there was yet another bashing. I run to the balcony, scream at the offenders, they run off. I go down to the guy who's being bashed and he passes out literally in my arms. We're waiting for the police and the ambulance to arrive. He loses consciousness and I'm sitting there going, has this guy just died?
Yeah.
Like, is that the last time he opens his eyes? Kind of like, literally happening on suburban streets. But Edwina and I talked about it. So we ended up leaving because I was actually developing an anxiety condition because of the hypervigilance. I was working from home at the time, looking after a young son. Yeah, and I was developing a hypervigilance around just the amount of crime and every noise outside. Is that another carjacking? There were government employees. The tax office building used to be right there, and they'd come to their cars and get mugged on their way back to their cars.
Well, carjacking is now a thing happening in Victoria. Like, this is happening. I'm like, this is South African third world stuff.
Yeah. But so speaking of South African third world stuff, we would come driving into Dandenong, and we were in kind of the centre of Dandenong, and on I think there were 4 separate occasions, there would be a street that we wanted to drive down was closed off, and there was a body with a sheet over it in the street. And the number of times you would go out and you'd have that tension in the air, that very unfun atmosphere. Yeah. And there's a group of Islander males over there, there's some Afghan males on that corner, and the Sudanese males are up on that corner, and you just know this isn't nice.
It's just a tension, it's an uneasiness. And
it resulted in multiple stabbings that were fatal in the 4 years that we lived there, on the streets immediately around our house.
It's getting to a point where, like you said, hypervigilance. Like, I'm lucky enough to have travelled extensively across the world. I have been to some pretty, uncomfortable places. And I have never felt like that in my own home, and I now feel like that. I now feel like I'm always looking over my shoulder. I'm holding my bag a little bit tighter. I'm making sure I park my car somewhere where, where
the cameras,
line of vision, lights, and I never thought of these things prior.
And by not dealing with the actual criminals, we're fomenting a situation where people are going to simply want to reject the entire race, right? Because I've also seen lots of Sudanese kids in school uniforms, diligently going to school and studying and everything else. But if we don't deal with the small number of them that are serial hardened criminals at this point, I mean, they need to be dealt with. If we don't deal with them, the community backlash ends up being against the whole lot, not against the individuals. And that's my frustration.
I say this all the time, I've extensively traveled the Middle East. It's one of my favorite places in the world. There's some really amazing culture, the food, the people. I've never had a bad time. But having said that, it's always the exceptional few who tarnish everyone. And it's the same here. You get a couple of skinheads, every white person's a racist. You get a couple of Sudanese kids, all Sudanese kids are criminals.
It's like they say, it's the 99% that ruin it for the rest.
100%. It's the absolutes, and it's just.
She missed it. Did you get it?
No, I got it. I did. It's the absolutes that drive me crazy, and I'm sitting here going as I said again with the Israel and Palestine thing, I've got friends on both sides, and I'm just like, you can't win because you can't say anything, because if you say anything, you're a racist or you're a misogynist or you're a homophobe.
And so the whole thing builds up pressure until eventually it explodes in some really ugly way. And I want to disagree with you, but I can't disagree with you. I've got to tell you,
I was in the city 2 weekends ago or 3 weekends ago with my partner, and we just both said and he's a big dude, he's not small, and I'm just like, nah.
Don't like it. Yep.
There's something off. I can't explain it. It's just an intuition. And I just feel like either it's a mass casualty event, something stupid. I mean, you talked about, I don't know what ever eventuated from it, but the caravan full of explosives.
Yeah.
In the back of my mind, I'm like, Melbourne would be the perfect place for a mass casualty event.
We've had them before. I mean, what was his name? Garganzulis. Now he was a combination of crazy, but also ideological and religiously motivated. And there was a whole drugs, and there was a whole bunch of stuff all in there.
Yeah.
But one of the realities that we have to face, as uncomfortable as it is that we are much more vulnerable than we want to pretend that we are. And the reason why these things don't happen, people say, the only reason planes aren't getting taken out by bombs in suitcases is because we have all the airport security. Okay, well then why aren't they bombing trains? Because you could kill a lot of people I'm not going to go into details on how, but I used to ride the trains a lot, and I became very aware of the vulnerability. I'm like, anytime I step on, there's a suitcase somewhere. It's like, I need to know who is the person. Because often people put a suitcase and then sit 3 rows away.
Yeah.
That person 10 stops later could get up and walk off, and no one's going to connect them back to that suitcase.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
So
sorry, to finish my point, the reason it's not happening a lot is because we don't have the people who want to do it. My concern is now that these people, because people don't do that as their first crime.
No.
People do that after being on the police radar for a very long time. If we're not dealing with the people on the police radar for actual violent crimes against the public, then sooner or later one of them graduates up to that level of hardness where they will commit an act.
I think you can already argue the point that a lot of these young kids have been radicalised, like not necessarily against anything ideologically, but there is definitely a part of them that feels so emboldened that like there's no consequences, like the kid I talked about.
This has been such a wonderful, happy, upbeat podcast.
Next one.
Let's just dive into a couple of happy topics, and then we're going to be out of time. I mean, we're
All right.
All right. Happy.
Happy. Bring back plastic straws and incandescent light bulbs.
Yes, incandescent light bulbs, that soft, warm light. Like when they first brought out the low energy light globes and they had that horrible greenish tinge and they took ages to warm up, horrible, disgusting things. Burn that electricity, burn the coal, give me the incandescent light bulbs, and please, can I have a straw that doesn't turn to mush and poison me?
I've always found it funny though, because like it happened yesterday. I went and got an iced coffee and it was in a plastic container with a paper straw.
With a paper straw? What? There was a comedian that did a great routine about, we have to have paper straws. Why? Well, because the plastic ones are killing the turtles. Where? Show me the turtles.
Yeah,
like, are they
100%.
just winding up with a plastic straw through the side of their head? Like ocean big,
Yeah.
straw small. He does a great routine. It's very, very funny.
Yeah, I just thought I love that it took an executive order to bring that back as well. It's like hilarious.
But it was because of executive orders from Biden that it was changed in the first place. So he was actually just reversing what had been done.
Other good news is we've got egg shortages again in Victoria.
Oh, the bird flu is back. So here's my question on this one. The experts said we need lockdowns. We've got to lock down the chickens because apparently a wild bird flu that is being transmitted by the wild bird population we can control if we just stop the chickens from... I don't know. Anyway.
Makes sense to me.
So the idea being if we kill some chickens now, then we're going to stop the flu and we won't have to kill more later. Here's the funny thing. The flu doesn't actually really kill these chickens for the most part. It's not especially virulent or deadly. Most of them would live. So we're killing chickens that would have otherwise lived. And secondly, if it's in the wild bird community already, you're not going to stop it. Is there a point, my question for the bureaucrats is there a point at which you go, we've killed so many chickens ourselves, maybe we need to change plan? Or is this just the forever plan?
Let it rip.
Let it rip, absolutely.
Let it fucking rip. Like, does it impact us in any way?
You can make little chicken masks if you have to. Just have them all, from behind a little mask, and that'll, if it worked for the humans.
Yeah.
I mean, it saved 100 million Australian lives were saved by masks. We know
100%.
that because I read it on the internet one time. Give the chickens masks, for crying out loud.
I can't help but feel like there's something insidious in this as well, like some kind of like food chain control.
The problem is I don't know whether there is or whether there isn't, but we've suffered so much for so long now, for 5 years, I mean, since it really kicked off.
Yeah.
That you can't dismiss such a gut feeling out of hand anymore.
It just seems really weird. Like, I go to the supermarket now, like, last week, we were cooking ourselves some lunch. And I said to you, I was like, please don't use all the eggs because I have to go to 6 different supermarkets to go and get them.
I'm very cavalier with eggs because we've got chickens.
You've got chickens.
So I'm just...
I'm working on G.
I literally, I poach them and then I put them on a plate and I walk down the main street and I'm like making eye contact with people like, look at me eating eggs like they don't matter.
Yeah.
Like I get them for free because I do. Yeah.
Well, this is the thing. Like, even just yesterday, I went to Woolies and you're only allowed to buy 2 cartons at a time. That's fine. When I find them, I buy them. But they're this big. They're like 60 gram, whatever they are. So you actually need 2 eggs for the 1 egg. Anyway, the point is, and they're $12 for the privilege.
Yeah. So price controls and shortages. These are 2 hallmarks of centralized government control. People don't like the word socialism. That's what it is. But the minute you have a centralized control of an economy, you will get both shortages and price controls simultaneously, and we are there already. Now, it's only affecting a small number of things, but we're there.
Yeah. All right. So we did have 6 other topics, but since we're running out of time, we're
Tulsi Gabbard. I have to do Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in.
And Bernie Sanders?
Well, no, I couldn't care less about Bernie. He'll be dead soon. As a kid, did you ever do stuff that was embarrassing? And then you're like, I've just embarrassed myself in front of her. And you realize how old everyone is. And you're like, it's okay. They'll all be dead soon. Right?
Yeah.
And then you get a little bit older and you do something really embarrassing. You look around and it's like all kids. And you're like, oh, that's okay, I'll be dead soon. It's, just sort of it shifts, it changes.
I can't say I've ever had that thought, but sure.
Yeah, okay. So Tulsi Gabbard looks a certainty now to be confirmed. In fact, that's probably happening while we're actually filming this right now. So it's expected probably by the time we go to bed tonight, we should know. But what's fascinating to me is that the next thing is a pardon of Edward Snowden. Now, that's looking likely. That was I was hoping for.
Do you think Trump will do it?
I actually think he will. Because of the depth of the corruption that he's now finding, how does he not turn around to the person who revealed the most corruption at a time when it literally cost him everything to do it? And now also you've got the likes of, not Elizabeth Warren, what's the male counterpart for Elizabeth Warren? The male equivalent on the Democrat side. Coming out, he's put up a new website inviting whistleblowers to come forward.
Chuck Schumer.
Chuck Schumer, thank you. Inviting whistleblowers to come forward, okay? And I'm like, yes, let's celebrate whistleblowers again.
Yeah.
Let's honour them for their courage.
Yeah.
And I think that what Trump is going to do is actually, I think it makes sense ethically, but it also makes sense politically for him to say, oh, we like whistleblowers now, do we? Oh, you remember that guy who blew the whistle on all of the corruption that we are now documenting? Edward Snowden, let's give him a pardon. And my prediction is before the end of next week, we will also see Tulsi Gabbard releasing the Epstein client list.
Yeah, so they've promised that. They're saying as soon as Kash Patel gets confirmed that's his first point of business. He'll walk in there and do it.
Yep.
Along with JFK.
And I reckon that'll be before the end of next week.
I hope so. But what I'm really interested in,
JFK's been officially declassified already. That's already happened.
Actually,
we haven't seen the files, and they've suddenly discovered a whole bunch more files that have been just misplaced. They put them in the wrong filing. I mean, because obviously when you have a dead president, you don't really pay a lot of attention to where you put the information about how it happened. So apparently they found a bunch more. Yeah,
so there's a lot coming here. What else? So we're going to do the rapid fire with the tweets.
Yeah,
all right,
okay.
So this has come out from Ben Fordman Live. He said, drain the swamp. Wage bills for public servants is now costing $230 billion every year.
Sorry, Ben Fordham, the Australian.
Yeah.
230 billion in Australia.
Yeah. Read it. I'm not making this shit up.
Wow.
That's our public service.
I follow this stuff, and that I didn't realise it was that high. That's insane.
That's unconscionable.
Yeah.
What did they say? It's the public sector. Sorry, public service is the biggest employer in the.
It's the biggest single employer, and that's you've got to look at federal and then state and then also local council and then all the various other bodies that are government funded. But one of the things that we all kind of need to stop and think about is that in addition to all the services that we receive from the government, the roads and the healthcare and everything else, we are also, for every one wage earner in Australia, that the taxes off that wage earner have to fund 1/5 of a public servant.
Yeah.
Right, and the 1/5 of their pension, 1/5 of all of the government vehicles and cars and everything else, 1/5 of all of the travel and everything else that goes on. We are not, when people say, oh, it's the cost of living. No, it's the cost of your living plus the cost of the living of all the leeches that you've got hanging on to you, by which I don't necessarily mean welfare cheats.
Yeah.
I mean government employees.
Yeah. What else have we got here? Tim Pool joins Rumble and brings his exclusive Timcast show to Rumble Premium. We'll be expanding our exclusive programs to sports games. We're literally seeing that parallel economy playing out now.
This is amazing, and this is one of the reasons why I went full time earlier this year, is to try and get in and sort of the birth of this.
So what you're saying is we should go on Rumble?
What I'm saying is that I'm now a sellout and I'm just in it for the money. So Tim Pool, this is an interesting one because he's a big enough brand that he would be able to attract his own subscriber base himself and insource that essentially if he wanted to. So the choice to team up with Rumble is probably more about the fact that he's confident that he's not going to get censored.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, little wrinkle on this from last year is when the Daily Wire tried to offer a contract to Stephen Crowder, and they said $50 million US for 4 years. Yes, there's that much money going around in this line of work now. Not for me or for Carlz yet, but we're working on it. One of the things that he took issue with was the fact that there were penalties for him as the content creator if he got restricted on YouTube.
Yeah.
And he said, well, this is unconscionable, you're gagging us, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, they're not, because you can say whatever you want in their members-only areas. You've just got to think strategically about which parts of your shows you're putting onto YouTube. So I think Stephen Crowder was in the wrong there. But YouTube are now under pressure because Rumble's doing quite well and other platforms are growing. You can jump on X and say anything you want. YouTube are now under increasing pressure to do less and less censorship, which is a good thing, and long may it continue.
Yeah.
10% battery remaining. We need to wind this up.
All right. Last couple. Nancy Pelosi, a little tidbit. Her annual salary is $174K to 223, but she's got an estimated net worth of $240 million. Did you know that?
Well, that's because she's about 240 million. She's about 2,000 years old. So that actually makes sense. She's just been saving all of her money. Yeah.
Do you think...
She's just really, really good with her grocery bills.
Let's end it with this. Let's say Epstein comes out, Diddy List comes out, and it's all... let's just say all the cards are on the table. Mm-hmm. What happens next? How few people, I should say, do you think would be left without crap on their face from that?
I hate to be the voice of reason. One of the things we need to be really careful of is genuine, just pure guilt by association. We need to make sure the people we tear down are actually guilty of doing something wrong, right? If I was an up-and-coming actor and Diddy invited me to a party at his house, I'd be like, this might be my break. I'd go along and I might go, oh, this is creepy. This is weird. Thanks for the invitation, Diddy. Gotta go.
Yeah.
Right? But now I'm on a list.
Yeah.
Right? If Epstein come along and I hadn't talked to the right people yet, and all I knew is he's a mover and shaker, he's a big finance guy, he's a this and that, and he says, hey, listen, want to catch up with you, have a coffee, I want to, you're traveling to that conference, so am I, jump on my plane. Now I'm on a list of passengers. That stuff can happen and be innocent. And so we do need to be careful. One of the reasons why they're not releasing the list, or why they said they can't release the list, is because people are going to make assumptions. And there is some truth to that.
Yeah.
So we do need to allow the process to play out. I think that what we're going to watch is the people who act guilty. So there's a Mark Twain, one of the famous sort of authors of that era, as a prank sent a letter anonymously to a number of his, sorry, was it him? Anyway, it happened. I'll look up for next week. I'll look up who it was. Actually, there won't be next week. You don't know this. I can't do next week.
Oh.
We've got a 2-week break. I'm sorry about that. Sorry, everybody, 2-week break. My fault. But he sent a letter anonymously saying, we are discovered, flee immediately, to 6 UK politicians. One of them disappeared off the face of the planet. All right. Now, in 2 weeks' time, I will look up who it was and I'll get you the name of the person. So it's going to be a bit of that. When that Diddy list comes out, who is it that heads for the hills?
Yeah.
Who is it that's like...
Or who's the quickest that's trying to get in front of it?
Yeah, methinks the lady doth protest too much, that Shakespearean kind of principle. That's what we've got to watch for, and then obviously look at the actual evidence of what really went down. We can't just burn someone down because their name is on that list, but we should certainly scrutinise every single person whose name is on that list.
I think so too, and I think what you're going to see is like most of these people, those, exactly like you said, those who are sitting there pontificating to us about how we should be living, are usually the biggest degenerates.
Can I finish on this? I love this so much. So there's all these people really angry that the US federal government is being audited. But these are the same people that supported the IRS getting 80,000 new agents so that they could audit the American people and make sure that they weren't committing any acts of fraud. Like, turnabout is fair play.
100%.
Sucks to be you.
Yeah, I can't wait. But all right. That being said, guys,
2 weeks.
see you next one.
2 weeks. See ya.